He walked through the night alone, and what came back was not the man who entered, but a light no darkness could touch. There is a moment when the known no longer contains you. The jobs, the rituals, the small roles that once fit begin to pinch. You feel an interior expansion that the outer life cannot accommodate. It is terrifying. It is vital. Choosing to walk into the dark alone is not an act of despair. It is an act of courage. It is saying, I will meet what I have been avoiding, more than I will escape. The decision is a hinge. Ordinary life swings one way. Deliberate transformation swings another. Most people drift. They adapt small edges of change and call it growth. The choice to go alone refuses gradual compromise. Solitude is the vow to drop performative identity and investigate the true cost of becoming. When you decide, you accept social misunderstanding. Friends ask, why? Partners worry. The world misreads your withdrawal as self-absorption or defeat. That is the price of honesty. The social field resists because it prefers predictable maps. But the inner summons is louder than social discomfort. You answer. The night you enter will feel like a loss. Loss is the grammar of initiation. It takes what you clutch, roles, expectations, soothing habits, and removes them to reveal structure beneath. The first weeks and months are often the hardest because the scaffolding of previous identity is gone while the new architecture is not yet erected. You must learn to tolerate the hyper-vigilant voice that screams, "Who are you now?" Tolerance becomes a discipline. In that tolerance, you learn patience, which proves essential to the long arc. Choosing solitude also clarifies priorities. Away from social performance, you discover what actually matters to you. Some attachments commemorate survival strategies, others sustain your true aim. The sorting process is merciless but merciful. It exposes energy leaks and highlights real commitments. This clarity is the first currency of emergence. Where you once scattered attention across many fragile desires, you now concentrate it. The capacity to concentrate is itself a power. There are practical acts that make the choice durable. Create basic rituals that buffer the mind against the chaos of unmooring. A morning practice, a place for quiet work, a writing habit that records small truths. These rituals are not pious, they are pragmatic stabilizers. They keep you present and help you to measure incremental change so that discouragement does not masquerade as failure. Finally, walking alone is also a promise to the future self. When you choose to enter darkness deliberately, you are saying you trust something not yet visible. But that trust is not blind. It is the decision to prefer the work of reformation to the comfort of the known. It is a contract with time. You will invest in a slow alchemy, because you see in imagination a life that current conditions cannot host. The night requires this contractual faith. Step in because the cost of not stepping in is a life half-lived. The first brave act is to leave the small, warm circle and walk so far into the night that only the truth can find you. Darkness is not a blank, it has structure. Enter it and you will meet textures you avoided in daylight, old grief that stiffens your spine, envy hidden under polished manners, shame that quiets your voice, the thin smallness that made you agreeable but also absent to your own edges. The anatomy of darkness includes these layers. Each must be observed, named, and visited with the tools of curiosity and stern compassion. When we live in light, we often curate a social performance, rehearsed stories, palatable versions of ourselves. The night strips the costume. Without the audience, things become raw. You may feel exposed, as if all your private knottedness were suddenly visible to you alone. That visibility is the work's gift. The mind that has never been properly witnessed by its own attention keeps repeating errors. Because the blind recurrent patterns continue unexamined. Darkness is the diagnostic room where patterns are displayed without disguise. Expect visceral reactions. Not only do you encounter narrative content, you encounter bodily memory. Trauma, even small quotidian wounding, sits in the nervous system long after cognition has rationalized it. You might experience somatic flashbacks, tension in the throat, a breath held in a cheeping place, a sudden hollow in the stomach. These sensations are legitimate data. Treat them with the same seriousness you'd treat a physical symptom. Observe, name, and respond with practices that regulate the body. Breath, movement, grounding routines. The body is the archive of living, honor its testimony. The dark also reveals relational debts. You will trace how certain people shaped your tolerances, how small humiliations designed your avoidance strategies, how applause became currency for belonging. These revelations are often painful because they remove the buffer of self-justification. You must admit how you colluded with your own diminishment to gain love or safety. That admission is not moral flogging, it is intelligence. The person who knows where they compromised can begin to negotiate a different arrangement. Another layer is the mythic. The dark brings up old inherited narratives, family scripts, ancestral fears, and cultural assumptions. You discover that some limits you assumed were personal are, in fact, inherited. Recognizing this is liberating. It widens the possible story of who you might be beyond the immediate biography. You can then choose lineage with awareness rather than obeying unexamined command. Finally, darkness shows you your resources. The same night that reveals fear also reveals courage. Inside the hollow, you find a stubbornness that has kept you alive, a tenderness that wants repair, a curiosity that will not be placated. Naming such strengths beside the wounds gives you leverage. You're not only cataloging defeat, you're inventorying assets. The work is an act of honest accounting. Losses and strengths recorded together. And out of that ledger you design interventions. The method is slow: observe first, then respond. Do not aim to fix everything at once. The anatomy of darkness asks for patient attention and small corrective practices, a conversation written but not sent, a ritual that marks a boundary, a physical discipline that reclaims the body. Over time, the sum of these small acts rewires how the night feels less like abyss, more like a deep room where work is possible. In the night you will meet what you avoided. In meeting it without flinching, you begin to turn the darkness into a workshop. When you are alone enough, conversation begins that you can no longer avoid. It is not chatter, it is inquiry. You talk to the parts of you that have been delegated to shadows, the fearful child who wanted safety, the rage that kept you from asking for more, the practical adult who adapted but never thrived. Meeting these parts is not psychotherapy shorthand, it is ethics, an honest negotiation about how you will live henceforth. Begin by listening. The modern habit is to interrupt interior signals with justifications. You say, "I'm busy," or "I'll do it later," and the complaint dissolves into the noise. Listening means allowing the thought or feeling to remain until it reveals its shape. You might ask, what does this sensation want? Or, what is the story behind this recurring fear? These questions are not for intellectual cleverness, but for clarity. The voice of the inner parts often has an origin story, an event, a need unfulfilled. And that story is clinical and practically know it, and you can design a response. Compassion is required. When you meet a smallness in yourself, the impulse can be to judge and then to try to fix. Instead, say first, "I see you." Naming is balm. The child inside needs recognition, not condemnation. When you practice this acknowledging stance repeatedly, "I see my shame, I see my hunger," you reduce the reactive force of those parts and increase your capacity for choice. Integrity follows. Once heard and acknowledged, parts ask for change, a boundary, a discipline, a ritual. The inner critic may ask to be tempered. The protector asks for safety. Answering these requests concretely, by setting a boundary, by making a schedule, by choosing a daily practice, moves you from conversation to covenant. Talk without action is sentimental. Action without inner alignment becomes coercive. The ethical meeting includes both speech and follow-through. Another sophistication is the art of negotiation. Some inner needs are incompatible in the short term. You cannot be both wildly experimental and domestically available without negotiation. Create trade-offs. I will take a morning for deep work if I honor an evening for presence. These internal negotiations are models for mature adult life. They teach you to balance aspiration and relationship without denying either. Transparency matters. Practice making small disclosures to trusted others about inner shifts. Saying to a partner, "I'm in a revision phase, I may seem distant, but I'm doing inner work," is not a plea for absolution, but a form of ethical clarity. It prevents misinterpretation and invites collaboration. The solitary path need not be secretive. It is disciplined about whom and how much to share. Finally, understand that this deep conversation demands time. You will discover new layers again and again. Regard yourself as a long-term project. The person who meets inner parts repeatedly becomes less volatile and more reliable. The reward is a coherence that others sense. People trust those who have integrated their inner contradictions because integration produces steadiness. Talk with yourself as you would with a beloved apprentice. Listen, respond with compassion, and keep the promises you make in that room. The central alchemy of solitude is practice. The dark is not an end, it is a furnace in which raw material, suffering, doubt, longing, is alloyed into capacity. Practice is the slow transmutation of pain into craft, of grief into skill. It is not mystical, it is disciplined. Iterative work whose logic is both simple and unromantic. Repeat, correct, endure, and refine. Start by choosing practices that answer precisely the deficits you found in darkness and conversation. If your nights revealed avoidance, your practice might be tiny acts of exposure, a short public reading, a bold conversation, a step into vulnerability. If you discovered emotional numbness, your practice might be a daily naming of feeling or a guided somatic routine that returns you to sensation. The key is specificity. Vague intentions become vapors. Specific practices become instruments. Ritual supports practice. Do the same small acts in the same context to reduce friction. The rituals need not be elaborate. They are cues that set the nervous system for attention. A consistent start, lighting a candle, setting a timer, a few breaths, orders the mind. When starting is easy, consistency follows. Feedback accelerates refinement. The solitary worker is not isolated from correction. Record, reflect, and respond. Keep a journal that notes what changed after a practice session and what did not. Find 1 or 2 mentors who can give rigorous but compassionate critique. Fast feedback prevents the fossilization of errors and keeps the practice alive. Suffering is reframed, it becomes fuel rather than indictment. An athlete trains through micro-trauma to build muscle. You train through discomfort to build tolerance and skill. Normalize the discomfort. When an unhelpful pattern emerges, treat it as data rather than doom. Ask what can be adjusted in the practice to challenge the pattern without overwhelming the system. Endurance matters. Modern culture worships novelty. Mastery reveres repetition. The person who finds joy in the 10th instance of a practice is closer to becoming unstoppable than the person who seeks constant novelty. There is dignity in the long repetition. That dignity produces a particular humility. You know that mastery is not spectacle, but stewardship of attention. Build capacity to measure increments. Use metrics that matter to practice. Time spent, fidelity to ritual, emotional regulation scores, a small visible product. The metrics prevent fantasy and deliver real evidence of progress. Combine quantitative checks with qualitative reflection. Did you feel steadier? Did relationships respond differently? The evidence becomes a map of transformation. Lastly, let practice ripple into life. The skills you build, patience, clarity, focus, capacity for presence, are not for solitude alone. They are the skills of living fully. When practiced in the quiet, They yield loud results, better leadership, resilient relationships, clearer work. The transformation becomes visible not as a single triumphant moment, but as a sustained shift in conduct. Turn your private suffering into public strength by practicing with precision, ritual, and relentless honesty. Emergence is not an exit from the night. It is a translation of what you took in the dark into the social world. The glowing self must learn to move through ordinary time without burning out or reverting. Integration is a delicate craft. Bring the clarity home without expecting everyone to mirror your change. Learn to be both luminous and ordinary. Begin with small returns. Don't attempt to broadcast your entire interior reconfiguration at once. Test the climate with trusted people. A short, genuine disclosure to a friend, a new boundary gently applied at work, a tiny ritual done together with a partner. These micro returns allow others to adapt and you to observe how the inner shift lands in relationship. Teach by example rather than by sermon. The transformed self is persuasive because of presence. People notice steadiness, not proclamations. Act consistently in small ways. Show up on time. Keep small promises. Respond with calm. And you will model the change more convincingly than a single dramatic display. The gravity of your life will alter expectations over time. Guard compassion. The world you re-enter has not undergone your interior transformation. Its defects and demands still exist. Meet others without the expectation that they will understand. This humility avoids contempt and preserves relational possibility. Integration is not superiority. It is the capacity to be in the world without being consumed by it. Sustain practices that feed the light. The rituals that supported the dark work cannot be abandoned. Return to them daily, even lightly. They are the maintenance routines that keep the inner fire steady. Without them, old anxieties will reassert. The glow needs ongoing fuel, small practices, occasional retreats, honest supervision. Translate boundaries into invitations. The skills you developed, clear limits, honest speech, self-care, are best expressed not only as walls but as spaces for others. You can say, "I need this time to work," and offer a next moment to connect. Integration balances solitude and reciprocity. You remain a person in relationship, not an isolated exemplar. Expect resistance, even from loved ones. Change can threaten other stories about you. Some relationships may constrict, some will expand. That is natural. Honor the grief on both sides when patterns shift. If a relationship cannot accommodate your groundedness, accept the cost without dramatizing it. Integration is not about winning approval, it is about living in truth. Finally, adopt a larger time horizon. Integration is generational. Your presence will influence patterns of family and work over years. Plant small seeds, teach practices to younger people. Create reliable routines in your household. Leave small artifacts that embody the new way. Legacy is not monument but habit transmitted. Return gently, teach by presence, and let the life you built in solitude rearrange the ordinary with quiet authority. When one person moves from brokenness into luminous steadiness, the field shifts. This is not theatrical revolution, it is contagious recalibration. Others perceive a new possible human, someone who is steady amid frenzy, generous without losing self, unhurried in achievement. That person acts as a radiant witness, proof that darkness, if entered bravely, yields a different kind of power. The radiant witness does not proselytize. Influence occurs because people yearn for stability in a chaotic world. When they meet steadiness, they are drawn. You need not coerce. Your life becomes an invitation. The witness posture is simple. Show up as a person who was honest about pain, patient in practice, and generous in return. That combination is uncommon enough to be revolutionary. Courage is contagious. Observing someone who stayed in the night and came back glowing loosens the tyranny of instant image. Where culture offers performative courage, loud posts, quick fixes, the witness demonstrates enduring courage, the slow daily fidelity. People learn that the alternative path is available. Small communities form around these exemplars, people who practice together, who support retreats, who sustain a culture where inner work is normalized. The radiant witness also recalibrates institutions. A leader who integrates depth brings different expectations to the workplace, care for mental space, respect for rhythm, and a premium on fidelity over spectacle. Changes occur not only in hearts but in procedures. Slow practices, short meetings, uninterrupted work blocks, ritual pauses become policy. This is the quiet work of cultural repair. Ethical weight accompanies visibility. If you have been through the night and gained clarity, the world will watch how you use that clarity. You are tempted by vanity, resist it. Use your influence to create structures that allow others to practice. Mentorships, small groups, accessible resources, rather than mere fame. The righteous use of influence is to multiply conditions where others can also enter the work without shame. Finally, understand the paradox: solitude returns not as privatism but as generosity. The person who saves inner labor for public display hoards potential. The person who practices privately and returns luminous gives an example that invites others into deeper courage. The moral arc is not to be admired but to be useful. Your life becomes a quiet rebellion because it rejects status as the chief value. It declares competence and character more important than recognition. That stance undermines a culture built on image and replaces it with one built on integrity. That is radical and necessary. Walk alone when you must, tend the night with honesty, and return not to prove but to illuminate. In that illumination the world will find a new courage.